When I was in my early 20s, I worked at my local McDonald's as a second source of income to pay for my college tuition. I attended med school in the city, which wasn't cheap at all. Sometimes we'd have to get there at really early hours of the day. I have a class every Monday and Wednesday night, meaning I'd have to get to bed early to wake up for work the next day. My manager, being the jerk that he was, gave me a week of opening shifts knowing my situation about my classes. One morning, I had arrived to work with my coworker to take out the food and help refill sauces to open the restaurant. Anyway, we're getting everything ready while I'm wiping down tables so we can open at 4, which is the time McDonald's usually opens here in Canada. So we're doing our tasks when all of a sudden we see a man looking inside from the glass doors. He's banging on the doors in a sort of rapid motion as if he wanted to get in. I give him a sort of denying motion, telling him that we were closed. However, he insisted to come in as he claimed he was hungry and just wanted a quick bite. I apologized and told him that we were closed and to come back in an hour where I could serve him. This seemed to faze him as he then walked away, disappearing into the night. I continued to help my coworker mop the floors before I see the man come towards the doors with what appeared to be a golf club. As expected, he smashes the glass doors and proceeded to step inside. I told my coworker that we had to leave through the back door and to call the police. She does just that, and we leave the McDonald's and into my car. Thankfully, police were able to arrive in a timely manner to catch this man going through our register. As police were restraining him, my coworker and I heard a commotion going on and a few tasers going off. After that, the police had given us the all clear to return to work. As we walk inside, we then see the police force the man into the back seat of the cruiser. His face will forever be burned into the back of my head as he stared down at us. It was a very menacing, revengeful type of look, as if the first thing he'd do once he got out of jail would be to come back for us. The inside of the McDonald's was left a wreck. Money scattered on the floor, cups misplaced, and even food items spilled on the floor. We, of course, had to clean it all up and finish getting everything ready to open while the police stood by to ensure our safety. We opened, and the day went smoothly as planned with no other disruptions. The following week, an employee at another McDonald's got injured during a robbery not too far away from our location. I quit after I learned that, as I didn't want to risk putting myself into danger. My area was known to be one of the safest areas in Vancouver, so for something like this to happen was rare. I ended up doing freelance work later on and eventually graduated to become a full-time nurse. Anyway, that's my story, and it's also the reason why I will never work at fast food again.
This took place at McDonald's while my mom was still pregnant with me. I've only ever heard a brief version of this story, but up until now, my mom had given me more detail as to what actually happened. This happened in the 80s. At the time, my mom was pregnant with me, and I was also financially unstable. This resulted in her falling behind on bills, struggling to pay rent, buying groceries, etc. Sometimes she used to have to eat at fast food joints to save some money, as groceries were expensive at the time. One night, my mom had just visited one of her old college roommates and decided to stop for food on the way home. According to my mom, it was around 10 o'clock at night, so there weren't many places open. Eventually, my mom had settled by going to McDonald's, as it was pretty much the only option left. She pulls up to the McDonald's, and as she enters, she instantly notices a man sitting at one of the tables. He was wearing a black coat with his head down, and nothing at his table except for a soda cup that appeared to be empty. Not wanting to pry and too tired to care, my mom gets her food and sits down at a table to eat. The very second she sits down, the older man on the other side of the restaurant begins to stare intently at her. She had acknowledged this, but decided to ignore it and just eat her food. Now, there's really no way to say this without sounding weird, but my mother was very pretty in the 80s. She'd get a lot of attention from time to time, and while it was strange, she didn't mind it. However, this guy seemed to continue staring at her, even while she kept to herself. As she's eating, the man proceeded to get up and walk over to her to ask her something. He basically had asked her if she had any money on her so that he could buy a drink. Now, my mom was very generous, and even with her financial problems, she loved the idea of putting good in the world. Also, I'm sure she would do just about anything to get him to go away, so she didn't really have a choice. So she looks through her purse and hands him a $5 bill, where he then goes to get his drink. After that, then he gets his things and leaves the McDonald's, where my mom let out a sigh of relief. Long story short, she waits about 20 minutes and leaves as well back to her car. Now this is where things take an unexpected twist. As she's in the car, she starts the engine when two police officers come up and tap on her window. She rolls down the window and they instantly ask her if she had seen a man in a black jacket. At first, she didn't know what they were talking about until she remembered about the man from earlier. Their description of the man matched the same exact guy that I saw to a T. Upon telling her that she did see the man inside the restaurant, they tell her that he was actually a convict, who was apparently wanted for murdering his brother and passing it off as a suicide. My mother was horrified as they told her this. The cops took down her info and description and left. My mom still tells me about this story of how she came in contact with the killer but wasn't sure if he was ever found. Just makes you wonder how many people like him are out there who have never been caught. I guess you really never know who you're talking to.
I'm an 18-year-old female, and this happened back in 2009 when I was a freshman in college. I lived in a small city in the US, which was an overall safe area in my state. I even told my friends that even some of the criminals in my city were polite. Long story short, it was a neat little city that really deserved more attention. The people were nice, and sirens would almost never be heard. One night, a few of my college friends and I had just finished a concert from our school performed by a local band. They never made it big, but they were still well known around the area, especially if you were into music. Anyway, we leave the school trying to find somewhere to eat as we were practically starving. It was around 11 at night, meaning most places were closed, making it harder for us to find food. Eventually, we decided to go by a nearby McDonald's as we were dirt-poor college students with little to no money. We enter the McDonald's and order our food and find a nearby table to eat at. For some context, there were 4 people. Me, my friend Emily, my friend James, and his girlfriend Samantha. As we're eating a total of 40+ McNuggets, I notice a man walk in hyperventilating as if he had just ran a marathon. He wore black sweatpants, a white shirt, and had on a backpack. Not that there was anything wrong with him, but something about him just made me feel uneasy. On top of that, he seemed disheveled with long messy hair and looked as if he hadn't been to the gym in years. Now, I'm not one to judge people, but there was something about this man that was just off. Not wanting to pry and too tired to care, I think nothing of it and just continued eating while talking to my friends. I nudge Emily and whisper in her ear if she thinks that man seemed off. She just so happens to agree with me and tells me that we should just not pay attention to him. We focus on eating our food while chatting with our friends when James turns around and made eye contact with the man. However, not even a minute after, he walks up to our table with a flashlight, smiling his smile. Hey there, weird favor. The toilet in the bathroom is overflowing. Can one of you help me with it?" We all just kind of look at each other confused and say that we were eating and to ask an employee. He disregards our suggestion and insists we help him out. We politely decline and tell him no, to which he then asks once again. But before I was about to say something, James says in an annoyed tone to leave us the hell alone and to go away. His face went pale and he grabs a drink before leaving the restaurant. Samantha kept telling us as to how uncomfortable the man made her feel and that she's sworn she's seen him before. We began to ask her if she was sure, and if she did, where she saw him. She said that she couldn't remember but thought it was sometime last week. We eat for another 20 minutes before leaving to go back home when Emily says something I didn't realize. "You know, he never went into the restroom in the first place. How would he know the toilet was overflowing?" I look at her with this unsettling face, and that's when I immediately thought of the backpack. Upon realizing this, several questions came up in my mind about why he had a backpack. What were the contents of it? What were his intentions? And what would he have done had one of us gone in there? These questions bothered me for a good week when James saw a chilling news report. Apparently, the same tactic had happened at another restaurant, only this time it actually worked. The same man had tried the approach and managed to lure a woman standing by the men's restroom. He was able to pull her in and do things I won't mention until a few people helped break up the situation. The news showing the man's face on TV made James almost spit out his water as he saw this. James ends up calling the police to put in our tip and what had happened. Police in my city don't mess around, so whenever something bad happened, they were ready to stop it. Eventually, Samantha had remembered seeing the man at a pub she was at. He didn't do anything, but described him as being drunk and annoyed at the bartender. Needless to say, this news went around like wildfire around my city and even my school. What had once been this nice area with barely any crime, only to have something disturbing happen. For those of you wondering, yes, he was thrown in prison. I ended up staying away from that McDonald's for a good while until the paranoia faded. It wasn't until a year later where I learned a truth I didn't know. James and Samantha had moved away, and it was actually Emily who had told me this. During dinner one night with her, I had asked her if she had remembered about the man from McDonald's many years ago. Her eyes went wide, and she said she was going to tell me something she never told me. Turns out, the man had ended his life in prison not too long ago. He couldn't live with the pain anymore and just decided to end it. I was shocked when I learned this and really couldn't believe it. However, it was nice to know that he couldn't hurt any more people while knowing our city was much safer. Anyway, that's my story, and I hope you can all learn from this and help prevent it. If you see or feel something is off, you need to tell someone. There are truly some messed up people in this world.